Hello and welcome everybody. I'm Duncan Grossard of Journeys with Purpose, and I'm delighted to share with you this evening a story of really remarkable rewilding in the heart of Europe. It is not just one of Europe's great rewilding and ecosystem restoration stories, but also the world's as well. The conversation tonight is going to be led by Isabella Tree, a renowned author and journalist, and particularly of iconic book Wilding, which tells the story of rewilding 3,500 acres of West Sussex in the United Kingdom, together with her husband, Charlie Burrell. And it really is the pioneering and visionary project here in the UK and across Europe that shapes how we can look differently at our landscapes and how we use agriculture and how we can look at livelihoods in the rural community. And as part of that conversation is Christoph and Barbara Promberger, the executive directors and founders of Foundation Conservation Carpathia, the remarkable story of looking at how a brand new national park in the heart of Europe, in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, can be created, a kind of Yellowstone. Now, I've been lucky enough to travel there in the past, and it is quite a stunning landscape of mountains and virgin forests and alpine meadows, and also contains the largest populations of bears and wolves and lynx in the European Union. And so we're going to be taken through that story of how we can think big and look out into the future and create these remarkable areas. So Izzy, I'm going to pass it over to you and Christoph and Barbara, and I will say goodbye from here and see you a little later. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Duncan. Thank you very much. And welcome to everyone who has joined this fireside chat. I gather we have over 600 people registered. Some may catch up with us later, but many of them are joining us live now. So welcome to everyone. And particularly to Christoph and Barbara Promberger. I'm joining you from the UK, from the middle of our rewilding project here in Sussex in the UK. I have to say, I do feel like I'm a bit of a minnow talking to a couple of whales because we've only got a few thousand acres that we're talking about here in Sussex. But Christoph and Barbara are king and queen of nearly or more than 50,000 hectares in the massive range of the Fagarash Mountains in the Southern Carpathians. So it's one of the most exciting projects in the world at this moment. And it's particularly exciting because it's unique in Europe because of its scale. As Duncan said, it's become known as the Yellowstone of Europe, and that takes some doing. Just a couple of years ago, it was recipient of the largest ever funding from the EU's LIFE programme for the environment. And that is just an incredible accolade of trust in this extraordinary project. I'm not going to tell you any more about the project or Christoph and Barbara, because I think we'd all much rather hear it from their lips. But really, I'd like to kick off to you both and say that when I first heard about you, heard your names mentioned, I was sitting with the late, great Doug Tompkins around a fireside in the Camargue with Andre Hoffman and a lot of other rewilders. And Doug was just kind of on a complete rasp about this extraordinary trip he'd had to the Belarusian side of, I think it was the Chernobyl exclusion zone, with this maverick couple, Christoph and Barbara Promberger, that they were a kind of expert in wolves. And sitting around the fire, you know, like this, talking about these extraordinary people, we thought, who on earth are they? So, and now I know who you are, but I'm longing to hear a little bit more about just those early beginnings. You know, the wolves, how you met. How did it all kick off, your sort of interest in this sort of rewilding lark?
Well, I guess we both share a big love for wolves, and this is basically what brought us to Romania in the first place. And I was, I think, hunting Christoph, not because of Christoph, but because of he was pretty much the only one by then that was working on wolves somewhere in Europe. I was by then still a student and super interested in working on wolves in a really wild place. And basically, Christoph was the only one I heard about that had started a wolf project in Europe, coming back from Canada from his studies there. And so 95 was for me the first time I came to Romania, just jumping on a night train in Vienna and traveling to Brașov, and not even meeting Christoph, but meeting these amazing forests and amazing people, and in the end also the wolves, which just, that was it for me. I mean, I really fell in love with the country.
And a very amazing man.
Yeah. I mean, with me, it started a few years earlier. I was at university. I was studying forestry, but not because I wanted to cut down trees. But that was sort of the thing that had all the natural sciences included, and especially wildlife biology. That was my favorite thing. And I remember I was once going home from a visit, and I had to spend an hour in the train, and I started to read a book that somebody gave me. It was actually a youth book. It was called Never Cry Wolf by Farley Mowat, a book that is very, very famous. And it just totally hit me. You know, I got out of the train, I continued reading until like 6 o'clock in the morning, until the book was done. And I was in love with wolves. And this book is about a guy who went up into the Canadian Arctic and researched wolves. And so, you know, by then I had these naive ideas. I thought I'm gonna parachute down from a plane somewhere in the Canadian Arctic and find some wolves and do some research on them. Of course, it wasn't all that easy, but I went to Canada. I did my master thesis on wolves. When I finished university, I just looked where are the most wolves in Europe, and this is how I ended up in Romania. And then, you know, this is how we ended up together.
But in those days, so this is the 1990s, you know, wolves were a kind of a new thing, as it were, in Europe, weren't they? I mean, now we can boast about having double the amount of wolves that in Europe than there are in North America, or, you know, huge numbers. And I think Germany, don't they have like 100 packs of wolves now? We got wolves in the Netherlands. And but then, you know, wolves was a very, very contentious issue, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. By then, you know, people thought that wolves live in Alaska and Siberia, and that's pretty much it. And you know, the Carpathians, people knew sort of a very, very remote and wild place. I remember I was by then talking to people, and I told you know, wolves can live basically everywhere. It's just a matter of letting them live, and nobody believed by then. And that is now, you know, what is it? It's not even 30 years ago. And but then, you know, in these 30 years, wolves have made such a remarkable comeback. I mean, as you say, you know, there's about 1,000 wolves now in Germany. I don't think there is a lot of countries left in Europe where there isn't any wolves except the United Kingdom.
Exactly. That may be some time coming.
Yeah, they have a hard time to swim across the channel.
But so what was your project then, the wolf project in Carpathia, in Romania, that you were working on?
Well, it started all off as a pure research project. And as I say, there was not that much known about wolves in Europe in general. So we started with, you know, the normal ecological questions, predator-prey relationships. And very soon, actually, we realized the most interesting part was not necessarily the pure species question, but much more the interaction with people, because we had, you know, most of the wolves in the European Union, but at the same time also over 20 million people, and I don't know how many million sheep in the mountains, and it all worked fine. So this was probably the most interesting part of the whole wolf project, to see how wolves, I mean, such a large predator, can coexist with the livestock in the mountains and with the interests of the people.
And even in the cities, we had one female wolf that we caught and radio collared. And I remember that one of our students, I would have been just 2-3 months gone from Romania because I had another project in Eastern Germany. And she called me and she said, you know, you can't believe it, but this wolf is running right through town to Brașov, which is a big city of about 300,000 people. And I said, you know, you guys had a little bit too much of the palinka, you know, the Romanian moonshine. And she said, no, 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 we saw her for sure. And, we followed her and we can observe her every night. She's going right into town. And then when I came back, it was really like this. They were walking down the main street, at 3 o'clock at night. By then there was no traffic, there was nothing. They crossed the whole city over on the other side to the garbage dump where they were actually hunting rats and cats and dogs. And they went into the parks of the city and went for the rabbits here. They just found, that this was an amazing hunting ground for them. Very, very easy, much easier food than going after red deer or wild boar. And this is really what opened our eyes that wolves can live everywhere.
And what attracts you to wolves? What attracts you to wolves in the very beginning, as opposed to, say, another predator like the lynx or the bear? Is it that sociability, that amazing adaptability of wolves? What's the link that drew you to wolves?
Yeah, it's a question we always get, and I don't know what it really is, but I think the wolves being a pack animal, a social animal, and being able to communicate, that is for sure part of the attraction. But for me, I think it was also the wolf being a symbol for really wild places. And even though it might be wrong now, looking at all the data we have gathered from wolves being really very, very adaptable to whatever condition, but still they're for me a little bit of a symbol for wild places, and that was the attraction, to see how they're doing.
And I mean, just anybody who has ever been in such a wild place and hears some wolves howling close by, it just raises your hair. It's just such a magic feeling. It's just I don't know why, but also we are dog people. We both always had dogs, and so there's another connection. But with wolves, people either love them or they hate them. I don't think there is anybody who has no feeling about wolves.
It's indifferent.
I mean, this is so much, that goes back 10 or 15,000 years in time of our cohabitation with nature, and wolves have always been a very, very crucial part of that.
So how did the Wolf Project then sort of morph into this, really big, the rewilding project of FCC? What were the germs that, that seed that sprang to life there? How did that happen?
Well, there was not really a smooth transition from this project to the bigger vision of the Carpathian Mountains. It was simply, I think we, after 10 years of doing this research on wolves and then later bears and lynx as well, and getting to know the area, we really fell in love with this place. And we got to know this, this forest, these mountains. And
because by then you'd literally, I mean, from doing your PhDs and, in your studies on wolves, you'd literally up sticks, moved to completely new country, different languages. I think you've got 3 languages, haven't you, in the area that you're managing now? That's a big commitment to, fall in love with Romania and say, this is where we're going to be. Yeah,
but this is really, I remember when Cora, our younger daughter, was born, we were sitting in Germany because we did not want to go to a hospital. And in Romania, unfortunately, due to the communist times, you had to go to a hospital to get a baby. We don't think that's a disease. We think that's something that is very natural. So we just wanted to have a midwife and get the baby at the midwife or at home. And we were waiting, and Barbara was already overdue for, I think, a couple of days. And it was in the evening. And I think labor just started, and we were watching television just, to kill the time. And suddenly there was this film about a village in the, in the traditions of a village high up in the Carpathian Mountains in Romania, and we both felt like so homesick. And this has never happened to me before. My father was a forester, and we moved around all the time. Every couple of years, we moved to another place. So I never had that feeling of being home. And this was the first time that I really felt like homesick, and that I felt like, this is where I feel home. And so we just really fell in love with that country.
So you're living in Romania. You're still studying wolves. And do you start meeting people who are interested in your work and this amazing area? I know you met Hedy Wies quite early on. Was that a bit of a catalyst for the Carpathia project?
Well, Hedy was actually visiting the project already during our large carnivore times, basically, and she simply fell in love with the country. She started to even learn the language to be able to communicate with people. But then after the carnivore project, we somehow, we started raising our children, and we moved to our own space and had a little bit of a break from the research and the conservation work. But it was really triggered then a little bit by Hedy when she came back after 2 years, I think, after we finished the project, and still had a lot of interest in supporting conservation work in Romania. And we traveled around with her and looked at these beautiful forests. And it was just a time when the restitution of the forests actually led to a big disaster of clear cutting and destroying of these beautiful forests. And Hedy seeing that and having known these forests from whatever 10 years before, we together decided this has to stop. There has to be something that we can do about. And that really triggered thinking about something else than just large carnivores, but knowing that if we lose these forests and these habitats, we're going to lose the carnivores as well.
So what was happening in Romania then was this area that had been sort of protected in a funny kind of a way by Ceausescu. I mean, for hunting rights, was now being given back to the people of Romania. But now, of course, there was a free-for-all and no protection and logging. So what sort of area are we talking here? I mean, what sort of area is under threat? Or was?
During communist times, about I think a third of the Romanian forests have been nationalized. So a third of it were owned by private individuals. And after the end of communism until 2004, the Romanian government then decided that they should give that land, these forests, back to the people. And this is in principle the right thing to do, obviously. You cannot just take it away. Until that time, all the forests have been managed by the State Forest Administration. And, overall, I think they did a pretty good job. Every forest service, every local forest service, they kept their areas that they kept wild, and they kept, their virgin forest. And it was sort of a pride of every forester to have, some really nice bits of old growth forest. But then in 2004, when the government decided that the forest should be given back to the former owners, these former owners in most cases didn't live anymore. So it was the heirs of them. They had been by then moving often, to cities like Brașov or Bucharest or somewhere else, and they didn't have any relation to this forest. And in plus, on the south side of the mountains, which was originally the Ottoman Empire, there was no land registry. So it was not even that people could look in the old data and look at, like, this is exactly where my property was placed. So they just got 5 hectares, 10 hectares, whatever their ancestors had somewhere. And they had no relation to that. So it was not like, this is a property that had been looked up by my grandfather, and then it was given to my father, so he gave it to me, so I have to look it up. Mm-hmm. So people didn't really feel like, this is their land.
There was no connection anymore.
Exactly. So it was, there's not everything was like this, but in many cases, they just got this property title, and then immediately, sort of a timber mafia formed, made up out of, former forestry guys and local politicians and whatever, and who understood that there is a big business behind that. So they went to these people and said, I give you 10,000 lei or whatever the amount is, and you give me the right to manage your forest. And they said, yeah, sure, great, 10,000 lei, a lot of money, and happy to do that. And then they went out and they just cut the whole mountainside because they went to 10 different people and they got 5 or 10 hectares from everybody, and then they cut down 100 hectares. And of course, there was lots of money to be made. And since there was also a period of time before Romania joined the European Union, there was high corruption, a lot of corruption, and police was involved, and the forest guard was involved, and the forestry itself was involved, and the local politicians were involved. And so everybody turned a blind eye on that because they were bribed in many cases. And so, it happened that this just spread like a tumor all over the mountainsides, and, just whole slopes became deforested. And this is where we felt like, we just can't let that go. And we've been involved in the creation of the Piatra Craiului National Park, which is a relatively small 15,000 hectare national park close by. And we saw that even inside the national park, they were restituting forests, and they were cutting down forests. So this was when we went to Hedi, when she came and said, Hedi, we got to do something about it. And the only possibility is if we compete with these logging firms and buy up the forests to put them back into protection. That was the only chance that we saw by then. This was the initial idea.
And then you began to get more supporters, more philanthropists on board, getting the vision.
Yeah, it was actually I think the real visionary person in that whole process was probably Hedi's brother, Hans-Jörg, who was, when he came and he saw what was going on inside the existing national park, Piatra Craiului, he said, well, that's bad. But anyway, this national park is quite tiny. It's not a significant size for a national park. And he, looked at the horizon and saw this, ocean of forest towards the west. And he said, well, let's see what's there. What's there? I mean, this is pretty amazing. So he came up with this vision of creating something that could become the Yellowstone of Europe. And so he was a visionary, and he was also the first funder of the project. So he also gave this big commitment of supporting this idea and seeing what's gonna happen if we start purchasing the first lots of forest, and see how that will proceed. So he had a lot of faith in these first few steps, I would say, and we're pretty grateful for that.
So he's now in his 90s, isn't he? And he's definitely a man who doesn't think small. So it's amazing how he thinks, and the scale of the ambition is absolutely stunning. I mean, just to give people an idea of the size of it. I mean, when I came out to see it with you, I mean, one valley system, it takes you half a day to walk to get to another one. I mean, we covered it very. Luckily, we went in a helicopter, but I mean, that was for a day without stopping and seeing these incredible landscapes. And you've got the forested mountains going all the way up to the sort of alpine levels and ragged peaks, and it does fill you with this amazing sense of wildness. It's really, really thrilling, especially if you come from lowland England.
Yes, I believe that. And I mean, this is also why it is such a special place. I mean, it is about 250,000 hectares, so it's about, I think, over 600,000 acres, and there's not one single village in there. I mean, the villages are all around, but this is one block of land, and it has everything. It has, as you say, these high rugged mountains. So it's spectacular. It's absolutely spectacular. It has these endless forests. I mean, we have done a study, and there is still about 10% of the whole surface is still virgin forests. Where in Europe do you have anything like this? We have wolves, we have bears, we have lynx, we have chamois, we have red deer. We've got everything, and it all comes down, to the small beetles. Beetles where we know in other parts of Europe they're all over the red list because they need these old growth forests. And you still find them everywhere. I remember we had a a gentleman from Belgium who was very much involved in funding a project on fire salamanders in Belgium. And we did a walk with him it was sort of a rainy day. And after about half an hour, he got like totally frustrated because he said, I've seen in this half an hour more fire salamanders than we have in all of Belgium together. And you know, this is such an area of abundance. It's just everything is there, and everything is you know, sort of the superlative there.
So how important in this extraordinary ecosystem are reintroductions? I mean, you've just been reintroducing bison, and I think you have 5 different herds of bison, do you now? I mean, I remember you sent us quite early on some webcam footage, I think it was at night, of the first herd of bison that had been released, and they were sort of running past the webcam and looking a little bit, you know, nervous. And we couldn't think what was happening. And then a split second later, there was a kind of bear lolloping after them. But so reintroductions, though, I mean, you know, how important is that for the project?
I mean, we're in the lucky situation that we have pretty much everything still there that should be there. But we were missing the European bison, and in some parts of the project area, we're missing also the beavers. So of course, they play an important role. And I mean, as you say, just opening these gates and seeing this bison, you know, leaving the enclosure, that was an incredibly emotional moment for us as well. And then when they started to reproduce, and you can see, you know, after the second year, that they are starting to feel home there, and they're doing well, and they're getting through the winter without problems. And you see they really belong to this landscape. That is pretty fulfilling, I have to say. And they play an important role, no doubt. I think also our carnivores are still figuring them out. They don't really know yet what to do with these animals, these newcomers. But we get more and more interactions, of course, and it's very interesting to watch how they are interacting. With the beavers, it's probably a little bit of a different story. Beavers are probably even more than the bison, incredible architects, landscape architects. And that is not always something that people appreciate. At the moment in our project area, everybody loves the bison. They are, you know, majestic. They don't cause any damage. They are, you know, beautiful to look at. The beavers are not having the same status, I would say. So that's a much more controversial species. But from an biologist point of view, of course, they're fantastic. I mean, by damming all these little creeks and creating their own habitat, they play such an important role, and we are trying to also monitor that to feed it back to the communities, what service these animals are really providing to the communities.
Because in a way, that is your most important part of the job, isn't it? It's how you connect with communities, and what you've done over these past couple of decades has just been absolutely astonishing. Can you just explain or describe a little bit of the work that you do to bring communities with you, to explain to them what the project is, why it's important, and to engage them, and so that they have a sort of vested interest in seeing it succeed?
I guess like first couple of years, you know, we did not communicate too much with the local communities. I don't know whether that was a mistake or whether it was the right thing to do. I mean, we were by then a pure land acquisition project, so we purchased whatever came on the market, what people wanted to sell. We purchased it so that the logging companies couldn't buy it. So there was also not much, you know, that we could propose or promise to people or so where we had a big impact upon their life. And anyway, people were very suspicious. I couldn't imagine that somebody would buy all these forests and not use them. They thought, you know, we're going to come in sooner or later with a big machinery and bulldoze it all down and harvest it.
Make millions.
Oh yeah, make millions. And there was rumors, you know, about that we found gold mines here, that we found uranium. that we're going to have big bear enclosures for hunting, that we build ski slopes. You just name it. There was nothing that we didn't hear back as rumors. The only thing that nobody could believe is that we would buy them to protect them. And then sort of in 2012, 2013, we started the first restoration work, replanting some of the clear cuts. And so this is where we started to have a little bit more interaction with the local communities, because we hired more and more people from the local communities. But it was still, we didn't really go out a lot with this idea of such a big national park, because we thought, we got to do our homework first, because before we talk there big. And then in 2016, we had a government that was very open to that, and they said, hey, let's make that national park. We said, just do it a little bit slower, not rush into it, because we have to take the local communities along. But they then made a memorandum, and they said, this is going to be a national park, and we start the whole process and so on. And then, suddenly a lot of people didn't know what was going on there, and they have, in Romania, they don't have really a good experience with national parks. National parks usually mean restrictions, and they give them relatively little advantage back. So people are not fond of national parks. And so suddenly, also those ones that had their own interests, in terms of harvesting timber and so on, they woke up and they started to understand the threat that we posed. And so suddenly we got really badly attacked in public, and with all kind of stuff that we are trying to kick the local communities out, and all that stuff that we had never ever said or planned or were even thinking about anything like this. And we were like shocked, because we felt like we're the good guys, we're doing so good work, and suddenly we get attacked for that. So it was not an easy time for us, but this is where we really learned we have to involve the local communities on all levels. And this is what we have since then been doing. We have been looking at the economy of the area. We've been looking at the social issues. We're looking at sports. We're looking at arts. We're looking at everything that targets or that affects local people, and we try to help people with that.
And how important is ecotourism as a sort of idea? Is that beginning to play into the project?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we actively developed programs for wildlife watching and for hiking in the area already. And I think it's something that people can relate to. I mean, local communities, tourism is always the first thing that you think about if you have a protected area. And there are already many guest houses in that region, but none of them has really used the amazing backcountry for activities. So normally the offer there is basically staying at the guest house and not much more, staying and eating. But they don't really use this incredible potential of the mountains in the back. And also because there's not much on offer at the moment. There are not many trails. There are not many possibilities to stay in the mountains. So all that needs to be developed. The infrastructure needs to be developed. But I think tourism is certainly the first thing that people think about, so also local communities think about as an alternative source of income instead of logging or using the forest.
Exactly. I mean, it's a huge employer, isn't it? And often, the money is more reliable, and it's less stressful, less hard work than logging or doing that kind of thing. But Rewilding Britain have just done a study showing that even in the UK, in projects that are barely 2 or 3 years in, they're already doubling the employment in rural areas. So, that's begun to change people's perception of rewilding. I think, that it's not about excluding people at all. It's actually about, boosting the rural economy as much as anything else.
Yeah, we actually also did we commissioned a study recently to Promberger, one of these big consultancy companies, also for us to see and learn whether we were promoting the idea of tourism, and we are strongly believing in such an economic change for the area. But we are not economists, so we also wanted to, get the experts looking at it and really looking into whether a national park and a proper development of ecotourism in that region can really make an economic difference. And the good thing was that it really turned out that way. The right way to go, also from a pure economic point of view, not even thinking about biodiversity and climate change, but just from a pure economic point of view, it is wiser to go for a national park and a national park development with ecotourism and the necessary infrastructure than continuing the way that the economy is going now by extractive use of these forests.
But as it is, just as a company now, just as an organization, you're employing what, over 100 people? So is it that roughly the scale of it now? I mean, it's like a kind of mini state almost, and you've got kind of rapid response teams, haven't you, to go and field problems with problem bears and all that. It's a huge operation now. I mean, compared to when you started, did you ever dream it would turn into something like this?
I think we took it step by step. At the beginning, it was just the two of us. We just moved on, and then we felt the need to have the first person, their first ranger, that looks after the forest that we purchased, and then we needed somebody who had a bit more background on this Romanian legal situation with forests. Then we had we leased the first hunting concession, which we did, in order to protect wildlife. That was the only way that if we would have the rights, we just could execute them in a way that we don't shoot. And then we needed, a lawyer, and then we needed somebody to help with the economy, and then we needed somebody for the communication, and then we needed somebody to work with the, to create partnerships with businesses and so on. And it just grew and grew and grew. And we have now, at the moment, we have 120 full employees and about another 200 people that are working with us sort of on a seasonal level, when we have the planting or the weeding or looking after the tree nurseries that we have created. And yes, it has become really big. And I mean, we just learned on the way, but we've been very, very lucky. We had a lot of people that helped us. And I think we've been also very, very open-minded. We always looked at, what's happening in other places, in other national parks. How do they do things? And, we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time we create a new national park, even if it's a European Yellowstone. I think the principles are always the same.
So you're very process-led.
I think so, yeah.
And so how would you imagine, I mean, if you're imagining what FCC will look like, what the Fagarash project will look like in 10, 20 years' time, what in your wildest dreams, what will have happened?
Well, in 10 years, I really hope that we have achieved this mission that the Fagarash Mountains are really a national park, and a national park that can really serve as a model for other areas in the Carpathians, in Romania, but maybe even for Europe. A national park where not only nature is thriving and all the wildlife is back and safe, but where also people gain from the national park, because I think that's the only way that protected areas can survive in the future, only if they really provide and enhance the livelihood of the people that are living around, because then people will start to protect it themselves. It doesn't need FCC anymore. Maybe it still needs it for some crazy ideas, but in general, it will be hopefully really supported by the communities and maybe even managed by the communities in the future.
And then I think, I mean, we're still very young. Well, you are. I guess, once the Fagarash is a national park, Fagarash Mountains are a national park. And actually we have once asked, just to get a view from somebody who is actually, he's one of the most important business tycoons in in Romania, everybody knows that person. He's probably one of the most successful business persons. And we asked him, he's a close friend of ours, and he's also on our board of directors now. And we asked him, so how do you think, what do you think from outside the probability for such a national park? And he said, well, I think in 5 years you have 50% probability, and in 10 years you have 100% probability. There's no way around. So, that sort of gave us a lot of confidence. And then we think, like, if we have such a model and something, that is really different from most of the other national parks in Eastern Europe, something that's really good for the people and where people want it and people are involved in it, then, we should replicate that in other parts of Romania, because, there's so much wild places yet. There are so many virgin forests. There's so many mountain ranges, and it's all, economically speaking, they don't contribute much to the Romanian economy, except some timber. But otherwise, the area is depopulating. There's people are leaving from there, and it's just such a jewel. It could become one of the driving forces of the economy in Romania. And then once we have a second such project in Romania, maybe we can have 10 such projects in Romania. So maybe we can go beyond the Romanian boundaries, and we can show this example. Once Romania becomes sort of the green country of Europe, we can show that for the other parts of the Carpathian Mountains, and in Ukraine, and in Poland, and in Slovakia, and then the Carpathians might become the green lung of Europe. And then if we show that this can happen, maybe this can happen in other parts of Europe, in Scandinavia, in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, in Italy, and other parts. So maybe this can all be just the start of something to change a whole continent. Now, I know you think like we're totally crazy, and probably we are, but this is when now 15 years ago, when we started and had this first talks about this Fagarash Mountains National Park, the two of us, who were we, and to see how far we have come, maybe it isn't all that crazy.
Well, you certainly sound a lot more positive than an evening I remember about 10 years ago, when we were sitting over a couple of bottles of wine in a bear hide and bemoaning the fate of the planet. I don't know whether you feel that things are changing, that actually we are turning the Titanic, that things really can happen. Are you feeling from what you've just said, it does sound like there is enormous scope, but are you really feeling that optimism now?
Well, I think conservation is always an emotional roller coaster. I mean, just look at the news and you see what's being destroyed in what speed. And of course, that really brings you down. And also us. I mean, we also have these discussions. We're oscillating, I think, between a lot of hope and a lot of positivism. And then again, being really down because you see what's happening around you, and how are you going to change all this attitudes and behaviors of people, because this is what it's coming down to. But yeah, I think, if we don't do it and don't move forward, then it's not going to happen. And it simply needs more people that think the same way, think positive, even though there are days when you think it might never happen. But it's also helping to look back sometimes, because if you always look forward, you always see the obstacles. But if you sometimes turn around and see what you already have,
where you've come,
where you come from, then it gives you a little bit of a push again to move on.
And then I mean, we've got two girls, and they're 18 and 21. I mean, it's not their fault that they're in this situation. That our generation and the generations before us have messed up the planet so badly. So I think, now that we are in such a situation, we have this network of people that help us, that think the same way as we do. We have that network of people that have financial means to make things happen. So we have to do that. I would feel very, very bad if we would just lean back now and say, it's not really our business. It has to be.
Well, we've got some just a bit of time for some questions, and we've got some interesting questions that have come in. So here's one to kick off from Christopher Hewitt. Christopher, we miss you. You've gone to Sweden and defected from the UK. But Christopher has asked, how do we help wolves no longer be a political debate and allow a genetically sustainable population?
That's a tough question. I think, large predators like wolves, they will always be controversial, and there will probably always be a debate. And we are facing that even now in Romania, not on wolves, but on bears, even though the country is used to cohabit with large carnivores for centuries. So with wolves, it's gonna be tricky, but I think what really is important is to also look at the change in society. And if society has decided, and this is what it's coming down to, that carnivores can be again part of our our daily life, then we simply have to put in place those measures to make it possible to cohabit. And that might be compensation systems and clear regulations. And of course, there's some people will have to adapt, but then maybe these are also ways of how we keep livestock that are simply not timely anymore, and where we have to change things. And this willingness to change is really the important thing, and this is where I think we need to work towards.
And I think on top of that also, it's so important that this whole discussion, especially around wolves, is being brought down a little bit back to facts. I mean, when you talk about wolves, it's like you throw a match into a barrel of fuel. It just blows up, and there's people that are totally against it, and there's people that want to protect every single wolf. And we gotta, just go down a little bit again. I mean, wolves are not the evil. Wolves are not the monsters, but wolves are also not the saints. And we just need to find a good balance. They should be allowed to live everywhere, because if they can live there, there's no reason why they shouldn't be living there. But at the same time, obviously, management needs to make sure that this cooperation works well. And sometimes, we might have to remove a wolf or a bear. I mean, even for us, we have 80,000 hectares of hunting concession by now, and sometimes we have bears that are really getting a nuisance. They're breaking into the stables, and they're breaking into the houses, and they lost their fear of humans, and we're trying everything to make them wild again. But if it doesn't work, in the last moment, we have to kill them. And we have been doing that. We have killed, I think, 5 bears by now, which is every time for us is a real disaster, and it's a sad thing, and it's a very, very hard decision. But, if we want the animals to live together with people, then we have to find this balance. And I think this is also, with wolves, that we have to, we should not just go and say we control the population now, and we shoot every year 30% of the population. That's rubbish. That's total rubbish. But if there is a particular animal or a particular pack that really focuses and specializes on killing livestock and losing the fear of people, then that may be a different story. Then maybe this is the particular pack that we have to remove. But removing just 30% of the population or so, that's rubbish.
So that's interesting. There's another question, which is from Charlotte Declay, I think. Declay, Charlotte Declay. I recognize that name. In the UK. What controls the wolves or bears? What controls those apex predators?
Well, it's nature itself, I guess. They are clearly at the end of the food chain, so nobody else is gonna eat them unless people shoot them. But they're usually either limited by the habitat or by the food source. And if they cannot access human food sources, then it really comes down to the habitats that we provide and where we allow them to live. And of course, I mean, there might be individuals that that go into areas where they're not supposed to be, and then people will have to control them there.
You know, and wolves and bears have been living for hundreds of thousands of years, and you know, we have now firearms and traps and poison since whatever, a couple hundred years. So you know, for hundreds of thousands of years, they've been living very, very well, and they have not destroyed anything. So they don't need to be controlled by us. They figure it out themselves, and you know, they just starve if there is not enough food around. And I think what we have to do is not to control them, but to control the damages, to control the interaction that we have with these animals. And if we manage that, then I think everything else is easy.
Okay, I think we've got time probably for one or two perhaps last questions. One is from Thomas Boyd, location unknown. And actually this is connecting. I know you did amazing stuff, or probably maybe still doing it, with Ukraine and helping people in Ukraine, and I think supplying food and supporting projects in Ukraine. This is a question that Thomas Boyd is asking: is there any way we could expand this extraordinary initiative into the Ukrainian Carpathians as part of the recovery from war?
Well, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we have been involved in supporting, especially national parks in the Ukraine when the war started, together with Frankfurt Zoological Society, who actually has their teams on the ground there. And but we have organized a lot of food and all other supplies that they were running short of, and are still doing that with the help of our donors. And we are focusing especially on national parks because they were really becoming safe havens also for people, for refugees in the early days when they were leaving the villages, the towns, and they went to national parks to look for shelter. And I think that also made it clear how important national parks are even for people, even in these situations. And we'll see what's going to happen once the war ends and once everything needs to be rebuilt. And I think national parks will have to play an important role in that recovery of the Ukraine, and supporting the national parks there, and even trying to build new ones. We're definitely open for that.
Have you heard what's the latest news from Ukraine, the national parks? So they must have the staff. How are they getting supported? I mean, are they managing to hold out? Who are your closest connections in Ukraine?
Yeah, the national parks are, of course, in a very bad situation right now. About 50% of their rangers, of their staff, is in the army, defending the country.
Many died.
Yeah, some of them died, and obviously, the state budget all goes now into military. So they have very, very low budgets, and basically basic salaries, and that's it. So together with Frankfurt Zoological Society, we are helping them now, with infrastructure building in a way that they can at least survive. But then it's very, very important that the moment the war is over, that international organizations, and we include ourselves here, really help in that these national parks not just remain islands in an area that otherwise gets depleted, because there will be a huge need for timber and for all kind of other construction material afterwards again, but that these forests and national parks are really seen as something where the Ukraine can build its future economy upon. And hopefully, again, through this example that we have given here, or that we're giving in the Fagarash Mountains, we can show that. And we do have already now cooperation we've had before the war. Several national park directors came over to us, looked at it. We even share the same architect who was building, or who is building our infrastructure. He was building their visitor information centers. So we do have, and yes, we are very much aware that this is extremely necessary once the war is over. At the moment, it's good. There's no pressure on the forester because there's nobody there who could execute any pressure. But I think the real threat comes once the war is over and the country starts to rebuild.
So one last question, just to bring it back to Romania. This is from John Davies in Stroud in the UK. I've just spent a night at your Bunea, is that how you pronounce it, cabin?
Yeah.
Bunea cabin in the Carpathians, which was amazing, exclamation marks. How keen is the Romanian government to help you create your European Yellowstone?
Yeah, well, first of all, great that you have already had this fantastic experience at Bunea. Unfortunately, the government is not yet completely supportive of that idea.
That is nice said.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
You've got to be diplomatic.
You know, I think we can be quite open. I mean, this is just, they're not interested in what we do. I mean,
well, they're interested in what we are doing, but let's say they're observing more and they're a bit concerned about taking so much productive forest out of the of production, basically. And I think what is really important is to convince the government from an economic point of view. And this is what we are trying to do. And a lot of what our work is about at the moment is to really make this case that it's also from an economic point of view much more beneficial for not just the communities, but also for Romania as a state, including reputation in the European Union, including fulfilling all the targets and goals of the European Community. So I think a national park would be really helpful and help the government, but there's nobody there yet that really sees that potential.
But I think you know, the Ministry of Environment is just working on proposals where to put 10% of the country under protection, because this is what the EU requires through the biodiversity strategy. And I mean, I think this is now where our strength comes. If we can show that protection doesn't mean like you lose something, doesn't, because this is otherwise what they will do. They will take, you know, the steep slopes, the rocky outcrops, where there's not really any economic value in it, and then they will protect that, which is protected by itself. But if we can show through our studies and through our work that such a national park is actually a protection that brings money, that makes the country richer, then it becomes a win-win situation. Then protection doesn't become a threat to the economy of the country or a burden, but it becomes something that contributes to the economy of the country. And I think this is now where you know, we are in the phase and where the situation is as it is with the European Union requirements. And I guess we will see also in the next years, you know, dramatic change in the way how we can work with the Romanian government.
Well, that's a very positive note to end on. I mean, you have challenges ahead, my God, and you are running this amazing, huge project. It's so exciting, but where you've come from is just unbelievable. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all those amazing experiences with us, and to thank Journeys with Purpose for hosting and organizing this event. And I think if anyone is interested who's watching now and would like to come and experience some of this astonishing place, this wilderness we've been talking about, with the brilliant Christoph and Barbara, and Charlie and I will be there too in June next year. Do look at the Journeys with Purpose website. I think you can sign up for your interest to come on a trip there. And I'd just like to thank Duncan as well for hosting this wonderful evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we look very much forward to having people coming over and experience this area. I mean, as you say, this trip through Journeys with Purpose will be a very, very unique trip. We're very much looking forward to that. It's just going to be a very small group. It's going to be a very exclusive trip, and we're going to spend the whole week with that group. Unfortunately, time normally doesn't allow us to do that, but in this case, we're going to do that and show really, you know, insight into this project which is going to be probably pretty unique insight. But of course, we welcome everybody else. Just like we heard the gentleman that spent a night at Punya at the wildlife cabin, and there's lots of opportunities for everybody to visit and to appreciate and to enjoy these Fagarash mountains, and that's good.
But I just want to thank you, Christoph and Barbara. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for June next year. And thank you to everybody else for joining us.